The Stoic cure for external validation isn't what you think. It's not about ignoring what others say. It's not about becoming some emotionless rock who doesn't care. And it's definitely not about repeating to yourself that their opinion doesn't matter while your chest tightens every time someone unfollows you. Here's what Seneca actually said. The disease isn't that we want approval. The disease is that we've placed the center of our value outside ourselves, in the crowd, in the metrics, in the eyes of people we don't even respect. And here's the rupture. Seneca was one of the richest, most powerful men in Rome when he wrote this. He wasn't some ascetic monk preaching poverty from a cave. He lived inside the machine of validation, advising emperors, accumulating wealth, navigating the deadliest court politics imaginable. Which means his cure wasn't about escaping the game. It was about relocating your foundation while still playing it. If that's true, then almost everything we've learned about Stoic self-esteem is incomplete. Let's start with what we know viscerally but rarely name clearly. Modern psychology has a term for it: performance-based self-esteem. Your worth becomes a function of outcomes, likes, promotions, being seen, being chosen. And because outcomes are never fully in your control, your inner stability becomes hostage to fortune. Seneca called this living under the tyranny of the opinio vulgi, the opinion of the crowd. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, "I never return home with the same character I left with." Now in Seneca's Rome, this was social pressure and gossip. Today it's algorithmic. Your phone is literally engineered to make you check those metrics. The game itself is designed to make you dependent. So yes, your psychology matters, but the system is also working against you. And here's what makes it so insidious. The validation isn't always toxic. Sometimes it feels good. Sometimes it's accurate. A mentor praises your work. A post resonates. Someone you admire says you're on the right track. But none of this is the problem. The problem is the architecture. The fact that your sense of okayness now depends on whether that praise keeps coming. Seneca was ruthless about this. He said the happiness of the crowd is merely an idea, a shadow of virtue. Because what the crowd calls happiness is always conditional. It's wealth that can be lost, status that can be revoked, fame that's more unstable than wind. And the moment your self-esteem rests on these, you've made yourself a beggar. Not for money, for proof that you exist. Think about the creator who can't stop checking numbers. The professional obsessed with being recognized by a boss who barely knows their name. The person in a relationship who needs constant reassurance, not because they love deeply, but because they're terrified of being abandoned. These aren't moral failures, they're architectural collapses. The center isn't holding because the center was never built. So what's the Stoic alternative? Not indifference, not numbness, and not the modern self-help version of just believe in yourself. Seneca's answer is surgical. Real self-esteem is the stable recognition of what cannot be taken from you. He wrote, "Praise in man only that which cannot be given or taken away, that which is peculiar to him." Do you ask what this is? It is the soul, and in the soul, a perfected reason. Let's translate that out of ancient philosophy and into psychological language. Your worth isn't a feeling you generate by thinking positive thoughts. It's not a state you achieve by accomplishing enough. It's an ontological fact. You have the capacity for reason, for choice, for virtue. That capacity is yours whether you're praised or criticized, successful or humiliated, loved or abandoned. The Stoic sage is someone who has relocated their sense of identity from the exterior, which fortune controls, to the interior, which only they control. Seneca says the sage is content with himself, not in a narcissistic way, but in the sense that his happiness doesn't depend on anything outside his own character. Seneca calls this assentio, refusal of assent, not denial, not suppression, just, I see the judgment and I refuse to enroll in it. And here's where it gets interesting. Seneca quotes the philosopher Hecaton, who said, "Do you want to know what I gained today? I became a friend to myself." Read that again. I became a friend to myself. Not "I now love myself," not "I boosted my confidence." He became a friend, which implies relationship, dialogue, company. The opposite of loneliness isn't being surrounded by people. It's being able to be alone without collapsing into anxiety or self-hatred. Modern psychology would call this a secure internal relationship. You're not constantly needing external validation to feel okay because you've built an internal witness who sees you clearly, flaws included, and doesn't withdraw. That's what real self-esteem is. Not the absence of doubt, not imperviousness to pain, but a stable center that doesn't need applause to justify its existence. And here's the kicker. This isn't about becoming a hermit. Seneca was deeply engaged in public life. The point isn't to stop caring what others think. The point is to stop making their opinion the foundation of your worth. You can want recognition, you can enjoy praise, but if losing it doesn't collapse you, that's freedom. So how do you actually build this? Because here's the trap. You can intellectually agree with everything I just said and still check your phone 47 times today to see if someone responded. Seneca knew this. That's why Stoicism isn't a philosophy you read. It's a set of practices you live. First, constancy of purpose. Seneca writes, "Wisdom consists in willing, and not willing always the same thing," which sounds simple until you realize how violently it cuts against the grain of validation seeking. Because if you're always the same thing, if your principles don't shift based on who's watching, then you can't perform different versions of yourself to get approval. Practically, this means before you post, before you speak, before you adjust your behavior to be liked, ask, is this aligned with what I actually value, or am I optimizing for applause? That question alone will expose 80% of your validation addiction. Second, the vigilant witness. Seneca advises, choose someone you deeply respect, living or dead, and live as if they were always watching. Not to perform for them, but to stay honest with yourself. Modern therapy would call this installing an internal witness. Cognitive science would call it metacognition. Seneca just calls it philosophy. And then he adds a practice. Every night, become your own prosecutor, judge, and defender. Review your day. Where did you betray your principles? Where did you act out of fear of judgment? Don't flagellate yourself, but don't let it slide either. This is the ancient version of journaling, and it works for the same reason. You can't change what you don't see. Third, reframe pain, loss, and criticism. Here's Seneca's most famous line on this. No pain lasts long if it is great. No great pain lasts long. He's not saying pain doesn't hurt. He's saying, don't let it define you. There's a story about Cato the Younger. Someone struck him in the face publicly, a massive insult in Roman culture. Cato didn't retaliate. He didn't forgive. He denied it happened, not out of delusion, but out of a refusal to let an external act determine his internal state. Translate that to now. When you get criticized online, humiliated at work, ghosted by someone you liked, the question isn't, how do I make this not hurt? The question is, does this change what I know to be true about my character? If it doesn't, then it's information, not identity. And here's the hardest part. This only works if you've done the first two practices, because that's when the forging begins. Because if you don't have constancy of purpose and an internal witness, you won't know what's true about your character. You'll still be performing, still begging, still dependent. So what does the cured soul look like? Seneca describes it as sound, whole, unshakable, fearless. Not because it doesn't feel, but because it knows where its value lies. Think of it like forging a sword. The steel has to be heated, thrust into fire, into discomfort, into situations that test it. That's adversity. That's criticism. That's the pain of not being chosen. Then it has to be beaten, hammered, reshaped, refined. That's self-discipline. That's the nightly review. That's the practice of saying no to performative behavior, even when it costs you approval. And through that process, impurities are removed. The beliefs you inherited from the crowd, the desperate need to be seen, the addiction to external proof. What's left isn't decorated. It doesn't have jewels or gold plating, but it has its own shine, intrinsic, unborrowable, earned. That's real self-esteem, not the absence of wanting to be liked, but the presence of a foundation that doesn't collapse when you're not. Seneca put it this way: he who is master of himself can lose nothing. External validation might feel good, it might even be accurate, but it will never, cannot ever, be your foundation, because anything built on shifting ground eventually falls. So here's the question this video leaves you with. In what area of your life are you still living like a beggar of approval? And what would be the first Stoic gesture to start forging that sword within? All core references and books are in the description below. This video is part of the Philosophy Explained playlist, Stoicism, Existentialism, and Ancient Wisdom. New videos every Thursday and Sunday.